All right, so just thought I would shoot a quick video here on a little problem I just had to solve, and that was that when I built this tail case, I'm almost positive that I did not, in fact, I'm 100% sure I did not grease these bearings as I should have. What I should have done is taken grease and packed it right in the bearing. But I didn't do that. And so I built this helicopter about the beginning of the summer. And so it's got a bunch of flights on it. What happened over time was that the bearings must have heated up at some point, and this umbrella gear kind of melted. Now, this is actually the piece of plastic that keeps these bearings spaced. So you can see here this little ring. This is actually a piece of the other umbrella gear that melted, and it was wedged right into this bearing. Okay, so this is the result of not really setting the tail case up the way you really want to from the beginning. So pretty much my fault, definitely my fault, completely my fault. So a little bit of a learning curve and some errors that I made here on my first full up build. So I obtained the replacement bearings and got the bearings onto the umbrella gear here, and then this is like a plastic sleeve. Now it is a little bit of a trick getting the bearings out of this tail case, because what happens is you insert them from the back, and they go down here, and then they hang up on that collar, which is about in the middle of this fixture. Okay, so whatever you use to push them out has to be smaller than the collar, but obviously larger than the bearing. And what I wound up using was, this is a drive shaft from a 650X. And what I did, you can probably see the tool marks there. I just took my Dremel and kind of dremeled down that collar. Okay, so now this inserts perfectly through a bearing right here, but catches the bearing and stays within the collar. And then I just used this tool to push the bearing out. So to remove the bearings out of here, now that one was like stuck. I mean, it was hard stuck in there. That umbrella gear had melted. I mean, it has like totally melted. So what happened was, when it melted, it sort of fell in. Okay, so that's all that happened. The gear wasn't even stripped. It just kind of collapsed in, because there's like a little collar there that keeps the gear out. So when it melted, it collapsed in. And when it collapsed in, it disengaged the other gear over here. So the umbrella gear itself, the teeth were fine. It was just that when the bearings, were running dry, they got hot and they melted the umbrella gear shaft, and then eventually they melted this collar on the end, just enough to allow the gear to fall into the tail case, enough to not engage the gears on the back. And so that's what happened. And now this happened, it melted, it was probably about 40 degrees out. So this was obviously limping through most of the summer. So when you set up your bearings, just make sure that you put grease in them. You want to just like pack them in. And what I like to use is, I like to use these little micro applicators here, and just get a little grease on there and just pack it right in to there. And, this is definitely something that you want to keep an eye on. This is something that will get hot and will melt if it's not in good serviceable order. Now, with the grease packed in, it should be pretty good. I would say, I'll probably put 25 flights on it, and then I'll pull the tail case off and just double check it. The helicopter, and you're, taking everything apart to make sure that it is Loctited, which you should 100% do. Make sure that you pull this gear out, slide these bearings off, and pack them full of grease. And then they will just slide right back into here like so. And if you have melted them, if you did not put oil on them and they do melt, getting them and the shaft melts, getting the bearings out will be difficult. This first one here will come out, but this internal one will probably be stuck in that collar down in there. If that happens, you're going to need some kind of a tool. I know they have a bearing tool, but I don't happen to have one. This worked really good. I just had to shave it down a little bit. So that's, that's how I got the bearings out. That's how I got this repaired. And now this is just smooth as ice. This will be a lot better. So this tail should work a lot better. Everything's all repaired. Everything's all good. Luckily, this did not occur in flight. And I kind of noticed that something wasn't right with the tail. And so as always, keep a very close eye on your helicopters when you're flying them. And if something doesn't look right, it's probably not right. Probably something like this. Try to isolate pieces of your drive system and try to figure out what individual part is creating more stress than it should. I had to replace the front gears about a month ago. So that was my tail case bearing repair and how I would recommend that you set up these tail case bearings. And now, of course, just put it back together and re-lock tight your screws when you put everything back together, and this tail case should be all good to go.